Backyard Farmer is a co-production of NET Television and Nebraska Extension.
Tonight on Backyard Farmer, we'll hear about fire blight on crabapple trees and we'll see some shrubs that need spring care. That's all coming up next, right here on Backyard Farmer. Good evening and welcome to Backyard Farmer. I'm Kim Todd and we're glad you could join us for another hour of answering your gardening questions. Joining me on the panel tonight, we have our experts from Nebraska Extension. Wayne Onosaur is down from Wayne, kind of,
Norfolk.
Yeah, to answer all those insect questions. Dennis Ferraro sits in the turf chair. He's not answering any turf questions. We have Lauren Giesler, Rots and Spots.
Always great to be here, Kim.
And Sarah Browning is going to answer all those horticulture questions.
Hi, everyone.
You know, you can get your questions answered by dialing 402-472-1212. Our toll-free number is 1-800-676-5446. If you'd like to send us an email or pictures for a future show, that address is byf@unl.edu, and that's where you attach your pictures. When you do send us an email, please tell us as much information as you can, including where you live. And of course, we've got several ways for you to connect with us during the week: Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, the Backyard Farmer website. So with that out of the way, Wayne, you have been very patient holding that shiny object.
Yes, as Lauren may say, ooh, shiny. I have in my hand what we call a poplar flat-headed borer. This thing, as the name implies, gets into poplars, which includes cottonwood, which is very common across our state. I just caught this one over the weekend at my house, and you can see they've got this mottled yellow pattern on the back, on the elytra of the hind wings, and this gold iridescent pattern here up at the top on the pronotum. They're often confused sometimes with emerald ash borer, and the underside's also very metallic. For the collectors out there, these types of beetles tend to be some of the hardest ones to pin through.
So this is not one that we would want our students to attempt to pin for Dr. Hengmoss's class.
Well, let's just put it this way. Don't use the wimpy pins. Use a heavy-duty one.
All right. Thanks for shiny object, Wayne. All right. You're going to let those guys escape again?
No.
What do you have, Dennis?
We have some tree frogs. Actually, it's the same species, Cope's gray tree frog. Sometimes they're gray, sometimes they're tan, sometimes they're green, all the same species. And they're doing great this year across the state, and they're actually including their range even more west in our state. We used to only find them in the eastern quarter of the state. Now they're as far west as North Platte in the treed Platte River corridor. And they're always along the Niobrara as well. And they just eat insects. And they're probably laying their eggs all over the place. And this is our only true tree frog in the state of Nebraska. It's called Cope's gray tree frog.
They're very cool. Yeah, and you said they don't hop as long as you hold them up.
If you hold them high enough up, they don't hop, right?
Put them back in their box so they don't try to escape. All right, Lauren, you have something very interesting too tonight.
Well, I brought something along that's not a disease. My youngest son is a developing mycologist, and he's always out collecting things. And he went out into some hardwoods and collected these and brought them back and asked me what they were, and I thought I'd bring them along tonight. They're a coral fungus. So I've had these actually in my like whiskey barrel planters and things as they break down. Sometimes you'll see them in those. Just in wood debris, they're just something that's growing there. Really in general listed as a not edible species. They're hard to identify. But if you see those, I bet some of our viewers have seen them probably in some mulch or, in a barrel or something. So a coral fungus.
And they really
looks
do
like
look
a little
like
coral, yeah.
Yeah, they really
just
do
a
look
beautiful
like coral.
little piece of nature there.
There you go. Perfect. All right, Sarah, you have an interesting sample that is actually a picture.
Right. We get questions pretty frequently in the middle of the summer about potato plants that are developing fruits on the top that look like tomatoes. And this was a picture that was sent in by a viewer this week, and so I thought I would share it with everyone. There are some cultivars of potatoes that are more prone to developing these fruits, and this is actually the true fruit or the true seed of the potato plant. The part that we eat of the potato is actually a stem section, but this is the true fruit. Now, so the question that we get then is, can I eat these? Well, no. The fruits on potatoes are not edible. I mean, you have to remember, we're in the nightshade family here, and so you wouldn't want to eat those. It probably wouldn't be a great idea to save them and try to grow out potatoes from seed either, because typically we're dealing with hybrid potato cultivars that we grow in the vegetable garden, and if you grew a plant from seed, it could be anything. You get genetic recombination and you could get all sorts of different things. So don't eat them. As I mentioned, some cultivars of potatoes are more prone to this. Yukon Gold, which is a popular potato cultivar, is pretty prone to this, so it's fairly common. I would just trim those stems off because you don't really want the plants to put energy into seed production.
All right, thank you, Sarah. And no, they really are not going to turn into tomatoes.
No, it will not turn into tomatoes.
All right. Wayne, you get the first picture question tonight. And this is actually two different viewers sent us questions about elm. Accolade elm, and then the other one was a cultivar of lace bark, and they have numerous holes. This one's from Seward, and they're sort of curling, sparse newer leaves are larger, don't have the curl. They didn't see any active insects, but they wonder, were there insects, or what is the curl and what should be done at this time?
If they'll leave the picture up for just a moment longer, you can kind of see where that person's finger is there at the bottom of the picture in the center, where they're holding onto that branch. There's a dead spot on that leaf coming along those holes, and that would be an indicator that this would be elm flea weevil. And as the name indicates, it's a weevil, but it's kind of like a flea beetle in that it can jump. So what you see as far as little holes are from when the females would have been laying eggs along the veins of the leaves, and then they feed a little bit, so those are the holes, and they do this when the leaves are very young. So those holes then grow out, and that's why you get not the typical feeding damage that you would expect. Not something you're going to be able to do anything about now. As long as you're willing to live with a little bit of damage, not much you can do about them. And then later we can look at all those little leaf mines that are coming in. That's where that brown splotch is going. That's where the larvae is feeding inside of the leaf.
All right, so just enjoy the fact that lace bark elm also has lace leaves.
There you go.
All right, see how you can make things opportunistic. All right, Dennis, speaking of tree frogs, this is a Lincoln viewer who actually, I think, talked to you about this, and she sent in a picture of tadpoles in her bucket under the water hydrant. She thought they were tree frogs, and she wondered how to keep them happy and healthy and turn them into frogs.
Well, this can do on their own. She's nothing she would have to do except get them out of the metal bucket because it'll get too warm, especially with the sun we've been having the last couple of days, and get them in some vernal or temporary pond that's probably about 3 foot deep, and they'll do fine as long as it's healthy water. I don't know if those are actually tree frog tadpoles. I can't tell by that picture. If someone wants to have me identify a tadpole, they need to take a side view shot and a shot that I can blow up and see. Just to tell you, if it is a tree frog tadpole, the tip of every tail of every tadpole would be blood red.
Interesting.
So we can identify the frogs by the tadpoles, but we need a good picture for that.
All right, excellent. All right, Lauren, this is actually a viewer from Evanston, Illinois, and she sent us Blue Muffin viburnum pictures, and they're 3 years old. They've been thriving. She's seeing what looks like the new growth has been broken off but still attached. The affected stems below that point are turning black. She hasn't seen any critters on the plants, and she's wondering if this is something that we are familiar with in our part of the woods.
There's a couple things. At first, it kind of looked like it was physical injury to me, but if the description with the black below the lesion, there are some, for example, there's a Pseudomonas. It's almost like a fire blight that we can see on viburnum that could be, especially where it's that new growth. And if you've had frequent rains there, I'm not sure, but I'm guessing you have. And with that situation, you can have a lot of bacterial diseases. So I would recommend pruning that down, past that black affected area about 7 to 10 inches because it's a bacterial disease, and just using some sanitation to try to manage it at this point.
All right, thank you, Lauren. Sarah, we also have had a lot of questions about river birch this year, even still now. And this particular viewer says, seems to be missing leaves, doesn't look right, wonders if is there anything he can do about it. We also had a viewer send in a similar question about a Royal Frost birch and multiple others around town.
Well, the leaf that we're seeing in this picture is chlorotic. You see how the leaf tissue is yellow and then the veins are a little bit darker green. And that indicates that there's an iron deficiency in this tree. And birches in general are prone to iron deficiency. It's not that there's not enough iron in the soil, it's that they sometimes, it's in a chemical form that they can't pull up very readily. And it has to do with our high pH soils as well. So there's several different ways you can go about treating this. You could drill holes in the soil, and then you could put in sulfur and a micronutrient fertilizer and then a slow release fertilizer. You could do a direct trunk injection of an iron product into the trunks of the tree to help treat that. But left untreated, iron chlorosis can progress to dieback and leaf loss. And so that could be what you're seeing on this tree. Birches are also pretty prone to some borers, particularly the bronze birch borer. And if this is a really stressed tree, you may have secondary things going on like a borer infestation that could be causing problems too.
Yeah, kind of a bad year for birch all around.
Yeah.
All right, thank you, Sarah. Well, we've answered quite a few questions and seen some nasty pictures of what fire blight can do to your apple, crabapple, and pear trees. Right now, we're going to hear from Kevin Corris about what you can do to get this disease under control.
A common bacterial disease has popped up all over southeast Nebraska this spring, and this disease is called fire blight. Now, fire blight is a bacterial disease that affects most plants in the family Rosaceae. So this includes our apples, our crab apples, and our pears. Behind me are some crab apples that are severely affected by fire blight. Fire blight, as I mentioned, is a bacterial disease that gets in through the floral openings of the plant. So when the crab apple or pear flowers, it creates a natural opening in that plant that the bacteria can take advantage of and enter into the plant. It's a bacterium, and it can work its way down that stem, causing death all along the way. Some of the most telltale signs that you may have fire blight is that, as the name implies, the symptoms are a very, very dark stem and dark leaves. And when you have fire blight, the leaves will remain attached to the stem. Something to also look for is at the very terminal end of the stem, we'll get what's called shepherd's crooking. And shepherd's crooking is, just as the name implies, is that the very tip of the plant gets a crook in it or a bend in it, and that's very, very diagnostic of fire blight. There are two forms of control and management that you want to think about if you do have fire blight in your landscape. Preventative control is the best way to prevent this disease from ever entering into your landscape, and this involves applying antibiotics or copper-based fungicides or bactericides early in the spring as soon as those flowers are emerging. The idea is to protect that flower to prevent the bacteria from infecting. If you do have fire blight in your crabapple, apple, or pear, it's important to remove any of those dead twigs. It's also important to keep in mind that this bacterial disease is systemic, so it's working its way down that twig of the plant. So when you prune out, you want to prune the branch 6 to 12 inches past where you see dead leaves. This will ensure that you remove all of the bacteria when removing the dead branches. Also, the bacterium can be transferred from plant to plant and limb to limb on your pruning shears. So between each cut, it's important to dip your pruning shears into a 70% ethyl alcohol or isopropyl alcohol solution for 30 seconds between each cut. It's also important to remember that this is a water-based product, so you want to make sure those pruning tools are very dry before putting them away to prevent rust.
You know, roguing it out and sanitation are really the key things to remember if you're going to prune out those dead limbs. But getting your trees on a spray program earlier in the spring might be a better way to control the disease, or you choose resistant varieties if you possibly can. I think we're getting that question more about older selections than the new stuff this year. All right, Wayne, you get the next picture question. This is a viewer just west of Kearney. And they found the critter on a cucumber plant, and they wonder, is he a good guy or a bad guy?
This would be a classic case of the bad guy. Wearing
Uh-oh.
black and red, or more of an orange here. This is the bane of many of a gardener in terms of being the squash vine borer. It hits a lot of things, including cucumbers and all of our squashes, including our zucchini even. Yes, there is something that will take out zucchini. What you need to do, you can use floating row covers if you know you've had enough pollination that you can cover up for a while and get what you want as far as a harvest to keep them off. Otherwise, you're looking at treating along the runners with a permethrin-based product so that you can catch them before they get inside to start tunneling as the larva.
All right, so a bad guy in that orange cloak.
Does a piece of wet carpet on the ground work for those? To get them to collect under? I've heard people say that.
That
Does it not
is
work?
squash bug.
Squash bug.
And it
okay.
works
That's
early in the season, Lauren. You gotta
Okay.
use it early in season, and a board works just as well as a carpet.
Okay.
You get your couch out there too?
if you like watching them.
All right, Dennis, we don't know where this viewer is from, but she sent us a picture of a snake, and she wants to know what kind it is. Lauren, it's a picture.
It looks like it got hit by a lawnmower or something. It's a juvenile black rat.
And are they,
They're good.
they're good guys?
They are only semi-arboreal snake, which means it lives in trees. It mainly feeds on baby birds and bird eggs, especially if it's native to Nebraska. It could be one of the other rat snakes if it's not from Nebraska, but we're not, since we don't know where the picture's from. So I should say that.
Good guy.
I had too many experience with giant black rat snakes.
8 foot doesn't make a giant.
That's too big for me.
Anaconda's a giant.
All right, Lauren, this is a viewer from Clarkson, and they have a maple. It is a sugar maple, has chlorotic tips, but they're more worried a bit about these lesions on the bark. So chlorotic leaves, lesions on the bark. They want to know what is going on with it.
Yeah, so the picture with the lesions or the chlorotic tips, that usually if you follow that back, there'll be some sort of a canker in a tree with a scenario like this. There's a couple different ones I can't say for sure. Nectria canker is one that's common on maples. In any event, regardless of which one it is, you're going to manage it in a similar way. You're going to be doing some pruning of those affected areas. Hopefully you can prune out any of the dead wood out of the tree where you're going to have a lot of spore production from those cankers. And then those areas where if you see noticeable cankers on the branches and that limb's declining, I would go ahead and cut that off. You know, with a fungal canker, 3 to 5 inches. Bacterial cankers or bacterial disease like the fire blight, we say 7 to 10 inches. So I just use sanitation and clean it up that way.
And the white lesion things on the
Well,
trunk.
and some of that on their stems, though, sugar maple will have some white blotchiness. So make sure it's not just the natural growth of the tree bark, because you will see some different colors on a sugar maple, on a maple. So I would just be careful, make sure you're identifying it right.
All right, thank you, Lauren. All right, Sarah, this is a viewer. Again, we don't know where this is, but we know what the plant is. They want to know what it is and actually what it's good for. And they're saying it spreads like crazy.
This is actually a pretty common ground cover called bishop's weed or gout weed. The botanical name is Agopodium. But normally this plant is variegated. It has a green and white leaf. And the plant in this picture has reverted back to just straight green. And the variegated version of bishop's weed is a pretty aggressive ground cover. It grows well in shade or partial shade. But oftentimes a straight green leaf plant is even more aggressive or vigorous than a variegated form. So this one, may become a little bit of a thug and really spread itself all over. And if that's the case, you're going to need to pull it out or, go after it to keep it within bounds. But traditionally, this plant is used as a ground cover for partial shade.
Excellent, thank you, Sarah. Well, we've some timely advice for this week's Green and Growing tip. Here's UNL landscape management student Emily Stein to help us keep our flowering perennials from taking over the landscape.
Pruning perennials in the landscape not only reduces the seeding of those that have already flowered, but it also can delay flowering and reduce height in your landscape. Pruning spring perennials that have already flowered won't cause them to reflower, but it can reduce the seeding that they do in the landscape. If it's already set its flower buds, or if it's already flowered, most likely you won't have as great of a flowering in your landscape. Some perennials, such as hostas, foxgloves, and columbines, have individual spikes of flowers. Pruning those off means the plant won't flower anymore. The largest consideration after you've decided to prune your perennials is how much time you have. If you have the time, you can cut each individual branch. If not, it's okay to use the shears, but you need to make sure to not take off more than 1/3 of the plant.
You know, this simple chore early in June will help you shape your plants and control their seeding. And you can go as far as 1st of July if you really have to. It's also one of those things that needs to get done each growing season to keep your perennials looking the best, especially with those tall, leggy ones. I've seen some asters that are almost as tall as you are, Lauren. All right, Wayne, this is a Western Omaha viewer that has a bug. They say they are mini cotton balls flying around, and has wings inside. He's been seeing them for 2 weeks within the backyard.
Well, entomologists have a nice name for these things. We call them woolly aphids. We see them pretty regularly sometimes on apple and hawthorn. They can get them for, I've seen branches look like they're covered in snow on hawthorns from these aphids. If they're just flying around, they're not doing any damage to anything right now. If you're looking at a tree or something that has a lot of them on there, the insecticidal soaps will do a good job. Generally with aphids, we can look at soaps for that control.
All right, excellent. Dennis, let's see, this was the tadpole one, but we have a sapsucker question.
Sapsucker, okay.
Sapsucker.
A sad sapsucker?
Sad sap.
Because he couldn't get any sap. Okay.
This is from Sargent, Nebraska yet. Let's throw in another
sapsucker
S.
from Sargent, Nebraska. Sad sapsucker, okay, I got it.
They have a tree about 10 feet tall, 5 inches in diameter. They think a yellow-bellied sapsucker has been after the insects, making rings of holes about 10 inches apart, clear up the trunk.
It's possible. That, usually they go after larger trees.
Yeah.
And there has to be some insect there. And so really they need to control the insect, not the bird. The bird would not be there if the insects weren't there. And they usually go after insects that are in a fairly close to a pupa stage, later larval stage, because they're clicking and making a lot more sound. But what, they call them sapsuckers, but they're really after insects that are just under the bark or cammed in. So,
And not a whole lot you can really.
there's not much you can do. I mean, because it's not like you can haze them and make them go away. It's a matter of food for survival. So it's not like they're trying to put a hole there to live there, or they're trying to take some juices out of the tree. They're not an aphid. They're not a big aphid. So the soaps won't work. It's a matter of controlling the insect problem.
All right. And that might be difficult.
And since we don't know what kind of tree it was,
Yeah.
it would
Yeah.
make control.
Yeah.
We need maybe a little more information on
Yeah.
that one. All right, peony question, Lauren, 2 or 3, and you said you had another viewer ask you the question in person. They were beautiful this year in a lot of locations. Now it looks like they have a blight of some sort, and in one instance, the viewer said it was working its way down the stem, perhaps. So what do we have going on there?
So the most common one we see in peony is botrytis blight, and all the rains and overcasts are really conducive for that and favoring it. So, in general, we'd say don't overhead irrigate. Well, you can't control that when it's raining all the time. So the best thing is if you want to manage it, it's getting late now once it builds up. If you see it again in future years, you could try foliar fungicide applications. Any of the general landscape fungicides that would have propiconazole, even myclobutanil, those would work. I would, at this point though, just try to use sanitation. If you've got flowers on there that you have a lot of blight on some, just remove them. You're going to remove the fungus with that. It's not going to kill it, but it will make it look unthrifty this year.
All right.
And then just use good sanitation in the spring, next year, in the fall to remove that residue.
And that does not go in the compost pile?
Well, you can. I mean, composting is okay if you compost it correctly.
Okay.
With all of these, if you put it in and bury it and it's fully broken down, you're most likely not going to have much, particularly with botrytis.
All right, thank you, Lauren. Sarah, this is a Valparaiso viewer who has kind of an interesting question about ash. He's wondering whether anybody has thought about harvesting seed before emerald ash borer hits to keep the population of ash going?
That's a good question. I guess there are national seed banks, where people collect seeds from all sorts of indigenous plants. Just that we have that reservoir, when some really damaging pest comes in, like emerald ash borer, like chestnut blight or something like that. So maybe those will serve us some future purpose when we're losing our trees to emerald ash borer.
Never know.
Yeah.
Well, the warmer weather has helped our garden vegetables and flowers spring up from all the wet weather we've been having. Before we go to break, let's take a minute to visit our garden.
This week in the Backyard Farmer Garden, we're looking at the weather forecast, and we're seeing 90-degree weather. We really haven't had that yet this summer, so some of our summer vegetables are actually going to be growing up like leaps and bounds because they're really anxious for that warm weather. So we're going to keep an eye on our tomatoes and peppers. We're also going to have to be trying to stake some of those that haven't grown very much. So keep an eye on our garden to see how we're actually going to stake these tomatoes with some new ideas of staking. We're also going to put some mulch down, and we're going to put our soaker hose down because those warm temperatures, our plants really aren't going to like that since they've been used to this cool, wet weather. Our flowers are looking really great this year, so all those reds, yellows, and purples are really going to stand out come the 4th of July. And that's what's happening in our Backyard Farmer Garden this week.
It's time for a short break. Coming up on our show, we'll have Gladys's Plant of the Week in the lightning round. Stay tuned for more Backyard Farmer right after these messages. Welcome back to Backyard Farmer. We've got more of your questions to answer, and later on we'll show you some shrubs that need a little attention. You can still phone in your questions by dialing 1-800-676-5446. While you're doing that, we'll start the lightning round. Sarah, are you ready?
I'm ready.
We have a Sac City viewer who wonders whether you can use preen in sweet corn.
The preen for vegetable garden is labeled for vegetables, so that would be fine.
All right, and the other question associated with that is, will it take care of quackgrass?
Quackgrass is a perennial, so if the plants are coming back from rhizomes, then probably not.
All right. We have a viewer who had a lily that was white, and now it's yellow about 3 years later. This is a Holbrook viewer.
Pass.
All right, we have a North Bend viewer who had Dawn Redwood. It budded, it dropped its buds and its needles, and it has nothing. Is it toast?
Yes.
We have a question about volunteer tomato plants. Will they produce fruit?
Yes, they will.
Is soybean mulch okay to use? This is a Sutton viewer.
Yeah, soybean mulch is a great mulch. It's not very widely available, but if you can get it, it's a perfect mulch for the vegetable garden.
All right, radishes went to tops. What happened?
The things that we see there are plants that are too close together, too close spacing. They don't have enough room to develop roots. High nitrogen can lead to excess leaf development and not enough bulb development. Those would be my top two reasons.
All right, excellent. Nice job, Sarah. You ready, Lauren?
Come on.
Ready like teriyaki spam tonight.
Yuck. Okay, do we have any control for powdery mildew in our ornamental bee balms or Monarda?
Powdery mildew is so difficult. You can use sulfurs. You can direct spray with a water hose. That can help.
All right. Are there any diseases of raspberries that are associated with too much rain?
There's several. There are cane diseases that we can see and others. There's even a Phytophthora that affects them that can be an issue when it's really wet.
And should those viewers remove those canes?
You could rogue it out.
All right. We're still getting questions about pears with red measles spots on the leaves. What is that, and should they fertilize? That was the question
Most likely
asked.
cedar apple rust, no reason to fertilize.
All right. We have a garden center recommending fungicide for lawn diseases now. Is that a good recommendation?
It depends on your situation and what you can tolerate. There are a lot of diseases out there in the lawn right now. Brown patch is really active. Fungicides will help with that, but just keep in mind it will not kill the lawn, and usually it will come back. So it's a matter of what you want to tolerate.
All right. Nice job. You ready?
Ready like a frog in amplexus.
Whatever that is. All right. Dennis, is tree wrap or hardware cloth the best protection against rabbits doing damage to a tree trunk?
Hardware cloth is good, but always have a space between the tree and the cloth so it doesn't girdle the tree, and it has to be 2 foot high.
All right. What is a good turtle for a backyard pond?
Probably a red ear slider if you want something that won't get out of the yard that's not native. If it's native, go with a painted turtle.
All right. This viewer got a bat house for Father's Day and wonders whether it is something he should use or say thank you and take it back.
Oh, use it.
Okay.
Enhance it.
And where does he put it?
We have a neb guide on how to put up a bat. It's a whole thing we wrote through our extension where to put it.
Excellent.
Don't put it on a tree, put it on a building.
Excellent. Do birds eat the leaves of pepper plants?
They probably eat some of them. Probably not a whole lot of them, but they can, yes.
Okay. This viewer can smell but not see a skunk on an acreage near Columbus. Where should they either stay away from or look?
Probably a culvert.
A culvert. All right. Nice job.
There's a culvert action. The skunk is, no.
And on that note, are you ready, Wayne?
I'm not sure I can follow that.
No, I don't think so.
Yep.
All right, it's tomato season. Lots of tomato questions. This viewer has tomatoes that reach the normal height, but they don't put on any tomatoes.
If they're not flowering, I would look at a nitrogen issue. Too much of it.
All right, or pollinator?
If they're flowering and they're not putting on fruit, then maybe you don't have your pollinators present.
There you go. Is there a BT formula for mosquitoes that big mosquitoes, grown-ups, that can be used in yards and acreage ponds?
No, BT is a larval form only, so you have to target the larval forms, and there is one for mosquitoes.
All
BT israeliensis.
All right. How do you stop millers? And this is a Grand Island viewer that has them everywhere.
You have good weather stripping and everything sealed up in your home, and then you pray.
And have cats. Is it time for grub control?
Not yet. The adults are just coming out, so as we're looking right now, if you're looking at curative, no, not yet. Scout your lawn.
All right, same question for bagworms this year.
We're looking at everything kind of being delayed about 3 weeks, so keep your eyes peeled, but not quite yet.
All right, and here we are already at the past the longest day of the year, and we don't have insect creatures.
It's one of those years.
It is. All right, Sarah, what has Gladys brought us that's a beautiful combination?
Yeah, a really pretty combination of colors here from Gladys today. So these, the pretty orange flowers here in the front, this is a type of an Asiatic lily, and a lily hybrid. And these are great plants to grow in the garden because they're just so easy to grow. They grow from a bulb structure, and they like partial sun to full sun. And you just plant them in the fall, and they'll grow and they'll bloom for you and just be gorgeous. And so they're just really, really easy. And of course, they come in lots of colors, reds and pinks and purples and white and yellow, and then of course this beautiful orange. So and they make a great cut flower too. So a great plant to have in the garden. Then the other plant that she's brought for us here today is this purple flower here in the back, which is a hollyhock. And hollyhocks are kind of a short-lived perennial. Individual plants can live for 2 or 3 or sometimes 4 years, but they will reseed themselves. And so you'll get new plants growing in the garden just from the seeds that they develop every year. Gladys says that when she was a kid, they used to make dolls, flower dolls, out of hollyhock flowers, and we used to do that too when I was a kid as well. So hollyhocks can get 4, 5, 6 feet tall sometimes. They are susceptible to a leaf rust, which can make the foliage look a little bit ratty in the later part of the summer, but they tolerate it pretty well, and they just keep growing back. So it's not anything that has to be too big of a concern.
And it's,
So-
it's a perfect plant for beautifying an alley.
Yeah, and it's a nice tough plant. It doesn't need a lot of special babying or extra care. They grow in some pretty tough areas without a lot of TLC.
Yep, that is just great. And thanks as always to Gladys for sharing her garden with us and cutting those flowers. All right, you get a whole series of pictures on this one, Wayne. This is a lot of fun. This is actually a Lincoln viewer with this particular praying mantis, and we'll let them go through the whole series, and you can talk about what
Well,
they've
this is a
said.
Chinese praying mantis. These are adventive, as we might call an insect that's not from North America. And same Chinese mantis. Okay, we have an egg case that's hatching out here. You can see all the little praying mantids coming out. They're white right now because they've just come out of the eggs. Those will harden off and they'll turn into that green or brown color.
And they said on this one that whole process took a day.
For all
One
those
day
to come
for
out.
all that to come
Yeah.
out, and then they either went away or the birds got them. And they found that praying mantis living on a shopping cart.
Oh, wow.
And took it home, wondered how it overwintered on a shopping cart. Who knows?
If it was on a shopping cart, I'd wonder if it didn't come in from somewhere
From a
down
plant.
south.
Yeah,
If it was at an odd time of year.
Yeah, very, very cool to see that. All right, this is a Pierce, Nebraska viewer,
Okay.
Dennis, and they found this animal and its hole in a window well by the house. So there's the hole they think it made, and then the creature itself is that
Okay.
one.
It's a short-tailed shrew, and it didn't make the hole. Actually, this is the guy that eats mice twice its size and voles, and so the hole might have been made by a vole or a ground squirrel, and this went in there to eat it. If you look, if it got turned over and you got to see it, it has purple teeth. But shrews are solitaire. They don't usually dig their own holes. They use the holes of mice and voles that they kill. So that dead shrew was killing voles and
right.
eating them. They have a very high metabolism. They'll eat a vole a day.
Oh my goodness. All right, Lauren, this is a viewer near Murdoch, bald cypress, and they found that, and I think our viewers can see that white stuff sitting in the top of the branch there. They've seen some slime mold in their yard, and they wonder if this is something similar, and should they do anything about it?
Well, it's interesting. I've never seen a slime mold up in a tree like that, but with all the rains, I guess anything is possible. If it is, I wouldn't worry about it. Now, if we get into the fall time of year and I saw this picture, there are some different mushrooms that can form on trees that indicate maybe that tree's hollow in the middle and it's a fruiting structure. It doesn't look like anything I've ever seen, so it most likely is just a slime mold. Wouldn't worry about it. You can take a water hose and wash it away if it is that, and it won't be a problem.
Excellent. Thank you, Lauren. All right, Sarah, this is a viewer in Omaha that has a Vanderwolf pine turning brown, starting on the bottom, working its way up. And I don't know if our viewers can see some of the top on that side is a little bit off color too. They wonder why and what she can do about it to stop it.
Well, there could be some planting issues that could play into this. The things that we talk about quite often, planting depth, girdling roots. It could just be the site. It could be, that the soil is not the greatest and that, either the tree is sitting in water or not getting enough water. Another thing that was hard to see in that picture, but there was also some sap that was running down the trunk of that tree, which also makes me think, could there be something wrong with the bark on that section of the trunk where those branches the needles are turning brown? Could there be some type of a canker affecting that section of the bark, or some bark beetles have attacked the tree, or possibly just some physical damage on those branches? So what I would suggest the homeowner do is to do a really close investigation. Take a close look at those branches to see if they see cracks in the bark, if they see exit holes from bark beetles, if they see physical damage to the branches, and that might get us a little bit farther down the road to figuring out what is actually wrong with this plant.
All right, thank you, Sarah. Well, sometimes in our gardens, we have to make tough decisions about whether or not a plant stays or goes. This is especially true of our shrubs that might have had a tough time during the winter months or has passed its prime. Let's take a few minutes to take a look at some examples of shrubs that might use some special attention right now. Last November and the winter were really hard on a lot of shrubs in a lot of parts of Nebraska, especially things in the willow family. Curly willow, like this one in the background, either went to the ground entirely or had a lot of dead branches in it, and then just a few of those stems continue to grow. So our viewers are wondering what in the world you do about it. Since we're now in mid-June, it looks like our pattern of rain in some parts of the state is ending. In other parts of the state, it's already been a little bit dry. This is when we have to decide whether we're going to keep this plant or cut it down. And one of the issues with an old shrub like this is that if you take it all the way to the ground, it may or may not have enough vigor to survive. So what we're recommending is go ahead and take these shrubs back to a good live cane, give it a chance, don't do any fertilization or those kinds of things this year. Let it be, see if it'll recover. The same thing is going to be true of a lot of other shrubs in managed landscapes, and we'll take a look at a couple of those here in a second. We're also seeing a lot of shrubs do what these viburnums did, and that is that they may have had enough vigor to be able to leaf out earlier in the season, and then all of a sudden you're seeing these dead tops or dying tops. You're seeing foliage beginning to wilt, in spite of the fact that there is new good growth at the base of the plant. A couple of things might be in play here, one of them being if it's an older shrub or one that was under stress to begin with. The environmental conditions really gave it a double whammy. You're seeing a lot of bark spalling off on the base of these. And many times what we recommend with larger, older shrubs is you take out those big canes because borers can get in and do a lot of damage. So the cure for this kind of shrub is going to be to get rid again of all of this top growth, cut down to where you see the new growth emerging, allow that to stay over this season. Don't do any pruning on that to begin with. You'll shape that shrub later in the second or third year. One of the concerns about dieback in a shrub like the viburnum that we just looked at is that what is regrowing from the base may be reverted to an original species. Nevertheless, it may recover. A little bit simpler situation is something like this 9-bark, and we did see a lot of tip dieback on shrubs like Diablo 9-bark, the straight species, Weigela, some of the finer spireas. You'll notice that this one bloomed incredibly profusely, which was beautiful, and the dead tips have not emerged with any foliage whatsoever. Those can simply be clipped off, but the other thing that is happening is a large amount of brand new growth. You can see that actually shooting up above the old blooming stems. And that happens on a shrub that blooms on wood that is current year wood. So what you can do with this is you can actually go in, take out the tips, take a look at where that new growth is coming up, let it be until next year, prune before it flowers in the spring, and you are likely to have a really beautiful shrub. Having a good idea of what your shrub is doing at those key times during the year will help you make those decisions on pruning, or even to help you decide whether it's time to get rid of it and start over. And we were just having a discussion off camera about all of the shrub damage this year that is even showing up just now. Things leafed out and they are succumbing. So it's kind of an interesting year. All right, Wayne, this is a Decatur, Nebraska viewer. And the grandchildren found this last weekend, and they want to know what that is.
It's known as Leconte's haploa, which is a type of moth. The caterpillars feed on apple, cherry, blackberry, a lot of different things. Usually not a pest problem. If those wings were to be lifted up, there's some more color underneath those front wings that you saw there. And there's 4 other species that we have in North America. 3 of them I would expect that we'd find regularly here.
Does it have a common name, or do they just have to know the Latin name?
No, it is Leconte who named it.
Gotcha.
Haploa.
Gotcha.
If you want to know the scientific name, it's
No.
Haploa leconti.
Just reverse it. That makes it easy. All right, Dennis. This is a picture of a pear, which doesn't seem to have anything to do with you, but this particular viewer is from Wahoo, and she has a new pear tree, and it had some pears on it, and the squirrels got them. Okay. So her question is how to protect a fruit tree from squirrel damage. I feel her pain. I have lived 22 years in my house. I have never gotten a pear.
Right. You can put netting over the tree, as if you're stopping birds, and just have it pretty far wide, and you almost have to tack it to the trunk at some point, so they can't get through it, but then they can almost chew through it. They really want to get through it. The other thing is you can cage trap the culprit. Usually there's only 1 or 2 squirrels in the area that are after that particular area and call it their territory, and so you can cage trap them and take care of them that way. So live trap.
All right, and hope they haven't told their friends already, right?
Yeah. Well, usually they won't let their friends in because they're territorial.
Okay. All right, Lauren, this is, speaking of turf questions and stuff, this is a Fort Calhoun viewer that has browning of the grass blades, started in the past few weeks, random in the open full sun, 45,000 square feet of turf-type tall fescue. He wonders what this is and whether it can be controlled.
And actually the picture here, you can see on the leaf tip, you can see that irregular line on the margin of that lesion, and that's what we're looking for on this. There's some others in there if you look close, and this is a brown patch. Most common disease this time of year of tall fescue. Going to be favored by those night temperatures we had when it was over 75, so like even last week when we had some real warm days, it's going to be really favorable for it. If it gets cool, it'll really slow it down. Any of your lawn fungicides pretty much at the garden center are going to do a great job on this if you see that lawn control fungicide. You don't have to use it. You can get away without it, but if you want to really have a green lawn, you really ought to go ahead and make a fungicide application. Also, make sure you're not doing any fertilization this time of year.
All right, thank you, Lauren. Tomatoes, Sarah, with the tops being curled and wilted on a few of them, and Wayne was just commenting kind of the same thing. We're seeing curled leaves on tomatoes. What's going on?
So when I see curled leaves on tomatoes, my first thought is always herbicide damage. And quite often their homeowner will say, no, that's not possible. I haven't sprayed any herbicides. But, lawn care companies are doing quite a bit of broadleaf weed control this time of year. And so herbicide can drift easily for long distances, miles sometimes. And so that certainly is a possibility. There are some physiological things that can cause leaf roll in tomatoes. Cold nights, like early in the spring, can cause leaf roll. So can hot days and heat stress can cause physiological leaf roll. We haven't had very much of the hot temperatures yet, so I'm a little skeptical if this is a physiological problem. I still would tend to think it's more herbicide related. If you can take a real close-up of those curled leaves, there's kind of a specific way that 2,4-D and dicamba will cause tomato leaves to be deformed. And if we could see those really closely, I think we could tell you for sure if that's what the case is. If it is herbicide, usually the plants are stunted for a few weeks, but eventually they grow out of the damage and they'll start to flower again, and they'll continue to grow and produce for you for the rest of the summer. And it's okay to go ahead and harvest the fruits off of those plants. So it may just slow them down a bit.
All right, thanks, Sarah. Maybe you'll have tomatoes all the way up till Christmas. Well, we have a Twitter question this week, and we're going to invite all of our viewers to tweet back. At Piano Girl 1967 has asked, how can we treat our cherry tree so the fruit doesn't have worms next year? So tweet your answer to @BYFUNL, and we'll see if we can stump whoever sits in that bug chair next week, Wayne. So don't you tell them.
How do I get the opportunity to miss out on this every time?
I don't know. I think we also have an announcement this week, and that would be Raising Nebraska Pollinator Pizza, Thursday, June 25th, 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. in Grand Island. There's a number on the screen, and for those of you who don't know what Raising Nebraska is, it is the Nebraska building at State Fair. Backyard Farmer is going to be doing quite a few things out there. We're developing the outdoor space as we speak, and it's going to be a lot of fun. And this is pollinator stuff, so that's pretty timely right now. All right, Wayne, you get a question. And this is a fun one. I actually saw this outside the building walking in. It's a Columbus viewer. Roses have round holes in them. The rose leaves have round holes in them, and then there are also some that are jagged with all the upper surface of the leaf rubbed off. But the round holes, they haven't found any insects. What is that?
I think I had a rose slug question last time I was here.
You had a slug, but what about the perfectly round
The
one?
perfectly round holes are probably leafcutter bees starting to do their annual cut off leaves and line their nests. So what they do is they bore a hole into usually wood, and then they will line that tunnel with the leaves, and then they'll cap each cell off after they've provisioned it with pollen for the bee larvae.
And the other one probably is rose
The other,
slug.
if you're talking about leaving the top surface or the bottom surface where it's been scraped off, then it's probably rose slugs. And right now, I would expect that we would be in the area where we're going to be looking at pupation down in the soil. So you're not going to see them there. Wait a couple weeks when the adults come back out and we get our next generation, and you might find some new ones infesting your new healthy leaves.
Great. What goes around, right?
Yep.
All right, Dennis, following up on the shrew, two questions. The first is, what in the world can you do about the voles if you've got shrews? What do you do? How do you keep the shrews there in the voles?
Well, you can't encourage the shrews to eat the voles. It just has to happen naturally because, as William Shakespeare told us, there's no taming of the shrew.
Okay.
So we can't go that way. But you can help keep the voles down by using what we call box traps with a little bit of seed material to have a heart catch-all box traps that hold up to 5 to 10 at a time. Would get rid of the voles, and then the shrews wouldn't be there anyway.
All right.
Or you can just leave the shrews be and not tame them, and they'll do their job.
So, and this is actually a follow-up or a precursor to a viewer in New Jersey
Okay.
who has asked the vole question. He uses birdseed peanut butter on mouse traps. He's trapped 13 voles and some mice. He uses pine needles. He feeds the birds and is wondering if sunflower seeds and the rock walls around his house are actually attracting more voles. And then is wondering if he puts up an owl beam, will the owl take care of the voles?
Well, owls love voles, and especially great horned owls. So if you can get enough owls there, that'd be great. I don't know how easy it is to attract owls, especially it depends on the population there. Yes, the sunflower seeds and rock walls are nirvana to the voles. It's like, oh, we hit the pay dirt here. We got food and housing for free. So keep feeding the birds, and they love the peanut butter and seed, and have a rock wall, and you'll have voles.
All right, thanks, Dennis. Lauren, this
want
is
some shrews. I really want some shrews.
I'll get you some.
I want some shrews.
this is a Southeast Nebraska viewer, Lauren, that has a cherry tree. Was healthy, no, not so much. Leaves are turning brown. The trunk is stripping. Sticky brown stuff all over the place. So,
Cut it down.
and what do we think it has?
No, that's hard. Sorry about that. But no, when you start getting, anytime you get sap running out of the trunk, and the leaves could just be cherry leaf spot, so it may not be related, but if you're seeing large portions of the tree that the leaves are defoliating and the branches are dying back, you probably have a canker going on that there are a few that hit cherry in all the stone fruits. The best thing to do is use sanitation if you can prune out specific branches where you're seeing that area affected. But if it gets into the main trunk, that tree is going to go eventually. Now, it may take 4 or 5 years, but eventually that tree will not be there.
All right, thank you, Lauren. Sarah, this is an Alliance viewer that is attempting to grow kohlrabi in a container and has to because he has a disability, or she. Hasn't had any success getting them to grow to full size. Any suggestions on kohlrabi in a container?
Well, kohlrabi is a cool season plant. It's kind of like broccoli and cauliflower and cabbage. It really likes to grow during the cool weather. So I would take a look at when you're planting and you're seeding, and you might want to push that back a little bit if you could. And since you're growing in a container, you don't have to really worry about frozen soil because containers warm up so much quicker in the springtime. I would think you could be able to plant pretty early. So try to get them off to an early start. Make sure that you're giving them plenty of water, so that they're growing quickly, so that you can get that good bulb development. Otherwise, if spring planting doesn't work out for you, you could look at fall planting to have a fall crop. And so you're going to want to have your transplants in the ground probably around the middle part of August for your fall crop. And again, just provide them with a good amount of moisture, mulch the base of the plants, conserve that soil moisture, and I think that'll help you to get some good bulb development.
All right, thank you, Sarah. Wayne, we have about 30 seconds, and we have a chigger question. Controlling and battling the beasties in lawns, and this is actually a homeowners association, so they must all be suffering.
Oh boy. Don't let Dennis's little critters in.
We have about
Those
20
alternate hosts.
seconds. Yeah.
And then on top of that, it's not going to look attractive, but wear your rubber boots out in the lawn. If you don't want that fashion faux pas, then go for the DEET. Spray down your socks and the tops of your shoes, and maybe a little bit on your pant legs as well, down low, and that'll take care of a lot of the issue.
So as we always say, it's spray you, not the lawn on that
When
one.
it comes to chiggers.
And unfortunately, that is all the time we have for Backyard Farmer before we go into our chigger lawns. Thanks to our panel for another great show. Thanks to everybody who submitted questions and pictures. Helping us answer the phones tonight, we had Gladys Jurink, George Edgar, Bertine Loop, Kate Gall, Susan Strike, and Nebraska Extension Horticulture Assistant Terry James. From Finke Gardens was Luann Finke. Next time on Backyard Farmer, we'll be showing you the progress of our prairie project at the Nebraska State Fair. Extension educator Elizabeth Killinger will guide us through the planting and the growth of prairie plants on the grounds and show us how truly beautiful a prairie installation can be. So good night, good gardening, and we'll see you all next week right here on Backyard Farmer.